Hey everyone, welcome. My name is Lucas Hall with Landlordology and Cozy, and this is Rent Collection, collecting rent on time, every time. And this is a webinar that I put together based on a ton of research, and I hope that I can communicate some of the best ways for you to collect rent flawlessly with your rental properties, whether you have one or 100 or 1,000. The best practices are still the same. So the goal here is for me to explain to you exactly what may what rent collection means, and so that could be the different types of rent that you can and maybe should accept, and then how to do it. So what can you collect and how to do it and how to make it efficient. So let's get into this. First, I want to explain and kind of create the baseline for you. So in my head, and what this is going to lay out is that how do you set up a system that helps you collect rent perfectly, right? Well, what does that mean? What does it mean to perfectly collect rent? It seems silly, right? You just go get the check or you get the money. But no, in reality, and what I've been able to achieve is that you have a system in place that fits your lifestyle. It's super easy to maintain. It produces a steady cash flow that you don't even have to think about, right? That's truly the definition of passive. And then at the end of the day, it gives you more time to live your life. I didn't get into landlording. I didn't buy rental properties to spend more time working on them. I bought them so that I'd have a passive income that I could pass that equity and that asset down through generations. We're changing real estate. We're changing real estate, and real estate is changing us in the fact that we can build equity and build a financial security that we can actually give to generations below. And I truly believe that real estate is a fantastic way to do that. And lastly, you want to build a system that your tenants actually really like, because if they're happy, then they'll pay their rent. I want to give you an example. This is Craig Lauer. He is a friend of ours. He uses Cozy. He actually sent us this picture because he said, "Hey guys, I am collecting rent right now." Right? This is what rent collection should feel like. Now it doesn't for the majority of landlords. It feels like like nails on a chalkboard. But for Craig, he's using Cozy, and I use Cozy too, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. But he's surfing, and he's literally like that exact hour, his rent is being deposited in his bank account. So perfect. So how do you do this, right? There's a three-step approach, and this is what I'm going to go into in more detail. So the three-step approach, I think, to collecting rent on time every time is that you select quality tenants. That's number one, right? Because if you have garbage in, you're going to get garbage out. That's an old saying in the soundboard industry, in the music industry. No matter what the technology you have, if you put in trash, you're going to get trash out. But the same thing with tenants. I think if you pick poor tenants, not poor financially, but if you pick poor choices of tenants, then you're going to have problems the whole time, right? They're not going to get better. So you have to select quality tenants. You have to set and enforce consequences. This is so key, right? This is a hard thing for a lot of people. You really do have to set the rules and stick with them. If you don't, then you're going to be pushed over time and time again. And then three, you really have to make it easy and automatic. People, generally speaking, are very, very, very lazy, right? Why do this when I can do this for half the time? So if you make it easy, make it effortless, then the chances of success are just going to skyrocket. So who am I, right? Why should you listen to me? Why are you here? You probably came to this webinar through landlordology.com. That is a site that I founded, and then later it was acquired by Cozy, and now I work full-time with Cozy, helping us develop our software, which in my opinion is the absolute best product for landlords and small property managers to get their business up and running. I'll tell you more about that in a minute, but I am a landlord of 10 plus years. I have 5 properties in 3 states. I have single family homes and condos and vacation rentals. And at any given time, I have about 17 residents. I used to be an IT consultant for the Department of Defense, as well as a few other agencies, helping them to do a lot of really cool things with technology. And now I work for Cozy. So it's by far the best role I've ever had in my life, to be honest. This is Landlordology. So this is the website where you probably found out about this webinar. And if you haven't really spent some time checking it out, I strongly suggest you do, because it's all free. It's really, really free. And you can learn about how to be a better landlord. It's all laid out for you. And so this has been my blood, sweat, and tears for the last 3 years, is just giving back to the community. And I really had a heart for just encouraging and helping people be better and how to run this business and how to change the industry and that relationship between landlords and tenants forever. So there are really some interesting concepts in here on some of the articles, all about really being a quality landlord and not trying to look at your tenants as tenants, but rather customers. So check it out. There's a ton of stuff in there. And feel free to drop me a line too. I'd love to hear from you. Cozy is the parent company that provides Landlordology, and Cozy is modern property management software. It also is completely free. So let that sink in for a second. So here's the software that was seeded by Google, has some of the biggest investors in the country, including Tim Ferriss, and we're giving it away. It's kind of the thing, right? So it's freemium software. It's works really well. You can collect rent, you can do other things, and it's completely mobile friendly. All of my tenants are on it. They love it. I actually had one of my tenants who is leaving my property just tell me the other day that she wishes there was a way where she could search out other landlords using Cozy, which this may be a feature in the future, but she was like, I don't want to stop using Cozy, so I need to find a landlord that also uses Cozy. And I was like, that's a good testament. So a little bit about Cozy. First and foremost, we have about 45,000 property managers and landlords using us nationwide. We're in 6,000 cities and 10,000 zip codes. So what that equates to is basically we're everywhere. Literally everywhere in the United States. We're being used by tons of companies. We're being used by lots of tenants. Close to 70,000 tenants are paying their rent. And it's impressive. So what does Cozy do? Marketing, screening, payments, and education. These are the 4 pillars of what Cozy is providing, and it's 100% free. So marketing, meaning when you have a listing that you or a place that's vacant or it's going to be vacant, you need to find a new tenant for it, you can actually list your property with Cozy, and then it will syndicate to Realtor.com and Doorsteps and Oodle and give you this amazing, beautiful web page where you can actually put tons of photos and describe your property, and people can apply right there. So it's an online rental application. It's completely free for the tenants to apply. And then if you want background checks and credit reports, they're some of the best in the industry, and you can get those at the same time. So you can require that as part of your application. If you find somebody that you like and that meets your qualifications, then you can roll them into online payments and get them set up really easily. And then lastly, we're in it for the long haul. We're not going anywhere. There's companies all the time start up quickly and then fall aside. Like, we've been in there for 3 years, and one of the reasons why we have such a huge following is that because we provide this education. We realize that as good as a tool could be, it doesn't matter if you don't teach the person how to fish. So, you don't just fish for them, you teach them how to fish. And that's what we're doing with this webinar. That's what we're doing with Landlordology. And I'm super happy and excited that you're part of it and along for the journey. So I really do think that we'll all succeed if we stick together in this process. A little quick story. I actually had a property available just last week. I guess it's been 2 weeks now. And one of the tenants, or one of the applicants who was looking at it, was like, this is awesome. This is exactly where we want to live. This is perfect. Like, what do I need to do? And I said, well, you need to fill out an application, but I already have 2 of the groups interested, and they're putting in their applications too. So if you want in on this, you need to go ahead and do that. And it's free to do. And so she contacted all her roommates that they were going to go in together. And turns out one of them was actually hiking this mountain. This is a little mountain called the Matterhorn. And the roommate literally was hiking this mountain, stopped to apply for my rental place on her cell phone. Easy, right? And by the way, that's in Switzerland. So just super easy, right? And totally mobile and the way it should be. All right, now the meat and potatoes, guys. Thank you for sitting through that. That's kind of the initial pitch. And now we're going to get into just about rent collection. This is why you're here. I can see people are rolling in. Thank you, guys. Hey, for anybody who's new, I'm Lucas Hall, and this is a webinar about rent collection. And if you have any questions, just dump them into the question box on the right-hand side. I do see a couple questions, including, will this webinar be available to view later? And it should be. So we're recording right now, and as long as it doesn't have any intermittent bandwidth issues, then it should be available. And if you are signed up for this webinar, you'll get an email later with a link, but it's not guaranteed. So hope you'll stick with us. The Q&A at the end is actually one of my favorite parts, so stick with that. So this 3-step approach that I mentioned earlier: select quality tenants, set clear expectations, and then set up automatic rent payments. If you do all 3 of those things and they work in unison, you'll have a steady cash flow that you don't even have to think about. Really. You won't even have to think about it. It'll just happen. And it's the way business should be. So let's talk about that. 1, quality screening. You need to get this straight before you actually think you're going to collect rent on time. We have a book that you can download on Landlordology called The Landlord's Guide to Tenant Screening. And in this, you can just go through and learn about my step-by-step process where I can screen tenants in about an hour or less and make sure I find good quality tenants. So, but for this presentation, the point I want to focus on is, are they able and willing to pay rent? I think those are the 2 biggest factors. Are they able and willing? Not that there are other red flags, like they have a credit score of 400, or they have a history of arson, things like that. Those are obviously red flags. But are they able and willing to pay rent? What that means is, do they have the funds? It doesn't have to be a job. It can just be money. They can just have a bunch of money, or they can have a trust fund that they're getting payments from, or they can have alimonies or whatever. I mean, as long as they have the money, and are they able and willing, like, do they want to give you that money? I've met a lot of people who have money and they certainly can afford my rental property, but they have a chip on their shoulder. They think that the landlord is an authoritative figure. They have problems with authoritative figures, and they will delay rent just for spite. I mean, it's weird. Or they'll hold it back, because they think that the street noise is too noisy, or, and it's somehow my fault. So you got to find somebody with both. Are they excited to be a good tenant? So able and willing. What I do, and this is my standards, right? I put this in here because every time I give this presentation, someone comes up to me later and says, that's all well and good, but like, what do you do? So here we go. Here's my standards. This is what I look for when I review an applicant. I make sure that the total household income is 2.5 times the rent. I put 2 to 3 times in there because you have the freedom to choose, but that's the industry standard. For me, I choose 2.5 times the rent. So if they make, if the rent is $1,000, let's say, then everybody who's living there has to make a combined income of $2,500. So that's gross. That's not net. So as long as it's not something that they don't see, meaning if they are paying child support, and that is that just comes right off the top, so they don't even get that money, that I would withdraw that from the equation. But generally speaking, I don't worry about taxes or anything. I just the gross amount. No evictions ever, because evictions, now let me just be clear, an eviction, a real eviction, one that's going to show up on a background check, is one where the tenant and the landlord went to court because there was some dispute, and the judge ruled in favor of the landlord and said, I'm sorry, Mr. Tenant, you have no idea what you're doing. You're absolutely wrong, and you need to leave. And then the police either force them out or they leave on their own. So that is considered an eviction. That means they had a chip on their shoulder. They were fighting something they really had no business fighting, and a judge ruled against them. That's an eviction. It doesn't mean that a landlord terminate, some people think an eviction is like, oh, I'm being evicted, and no, your lease is just ending. Or you're month to month and your landlord is saying, I'm not going to rent to you anymore. That just means the lease ended. That doesn't mean they went to court. That just means you lose the right to live there. So I don't care about those, but if they went to court and a judge ruled against them, that is a huge red flag. So number 3, no convictions in the last 2 years. This is no convictions, generally speaking. I don't want to see anything on there, but certainly not any violent or armed crimes ever. So if somebody's got a battery charge, man, I don't want to be the person knocking on their door and they've got a baseball bat like in the corner, right? I'm sorry. That means you can lose your temper, and I don't want you to lose your temper on me. No or low credit card debt. So I certainly had one tenant one time, or one applicant, tell me she wasn't even sure how much credit debt she had. And I just looked at her. I said, okay, well, let's pull your credit report and find out. And secretly I'm thinking that's not a good sign, right? Because if you don't even know, that means you have no grasp of your finances. And how are you ever going to expect to get rent on time from that person? But generally, I'd like to see credit card debt, like especially store cards with the 20 to 30% interest rate. Those types of things, I don't want to see any higher than $1,000. Everybody's a little different in their financial situation, but if they've got $10,000 in student loan and $20,000 in debt on a credit card, that's a no deal. Okay, so here's a quote. I want to see. This is where we're going to use the question and answer little piece. So this is a famous quote. It's, "Renters with no income are fine people, but they make horrible tenants." I'll say it again. Renters with no income are fine people, but they make horrible tenants. Go ahead and give me your best guess. Who do you think said that? I'm pretty sure you know this person. Okay. Nope. Donald Trump? Nope. Nope. Big Bird? Nope. Okay. The answer is every experienced property management ever. Any manager that's ever dealt with tenants should understand this. And if you don't, then you really need to grasp this concept. Renters that don't make any money or don't have any money to their name are fine people, but they make horrible tenants. That's just a fact. So that's a good step in the right direction towards towards collecting rent every time and on time. So number 2, this is that second bubble that we talked about. Set your expectations on consequences. I like to tell people, well, I don't like to do this, but if the situation ever comes up where they say, hey, listen, I'm not going to be able to make this month's rent, I politely just say, listen, if you can't pay, then you can't stay. That's just the way it is. We agreed on a rent. If the moment it's late, minus any grace period, I'm going to file an eviction suit. I'm going to terminate your lease and file an eviction suit. Within your state laws. So everybody's state laws are a little different on how much notice you have to give, and you can check that out at landlordology.com/state-laws. But for me, I can terminate within 5 days after they're late. And I don't have a grace period. So anyway, I just let them know, sorry, you figure it out. Go borrow the money from somewhere, call mom and dad, whatever. But if I don't get my money, you're out of here. Okay. Next, set your expectations. So use a rock solid lease and stick to it. This is so critical. I've had a number of people tell me that they've got this awesome lease that a lawyer developed, but it's only 2 pages long. And they think, oh, it's simple is best. And I'm like, no, young Skywalker, right? It's simple is not best. Yes, you do want it to be in plain language, but you certainly need to try to come up with every situation that might happen and then how to address it in the lease. So my lease is about, last time I checked, it was 12 or 13 pages. And had like 0.11 font. So it's worth finding a rock solid lease and sticking to it and just saying, listen, hey, I'm enforcing the lease. I'm not actually, getting upset at you, or I'm not being mean. I'm just enforcing the rules that we both agreed to. Then suddenly you're not the bad guy, but the lease is the bad guy. And that's the position you want to be in. If you can be transparent, then you will be trustworthy. So make sure that you don't slip any clauses in there at the last minute before they sign. Make sure that you tell them what's going on. If there's a repair, let them know when that plumber is coming. Even as soon as or as soon as there's a change, just be transparent, right? And then when it comes to rent, find a system that helps you track all of that rent and lets the tenant see it, right? Because if the tenant can't see what's happening and they're just making blind payments, then they're not going to understand what their balance is. They're not going to understand what their late fees are. They're not going to understand that you charged them for light bulbs because they were supposed to do it and you did it instead. Random things like that. But if you can be transparent, they will trust you. And when you say, hey, listen, you owe me $50, they will believe you because it's in black and white. 3, review your lease with your applicants. This is a trick I've learned over the years. It's not always scalable. Like if you're managing 1,000 units, you can't do this with everybody, or you need a huge staff. But if you can, and they're local, and it's a great opportunity when you're first starting out and you're getting ready to sign a lease, that you say, hey, listen, I'm really excited you guys are going to rent this place. I'd love to take you to Starbucks, buy a couple cups of coffee, and we'll just walk through for half an hour. We'll walk through the lease and every single clause in there, and you can ask questions. And when you do that, you will make fans for life. They will love you, and they will say, this guy's on our side, and I don't have a problem paying rent to him. Believe it or not, I rented once in a 300 unit complex, and I remember signing the lease and never received a copy of it. Even when I asked, they said, "Oh, we can't do that." And I'm like, "What do you mean you can't do that?" They said it's private information. I said, "Yeah, it's got my signature on it. Why can't I have a copy? Why can't I know what I'm being held to?" I don't know what their reasoning was, but it just instilled bitterness and distrust from the get-go. Number four, if there's fees in your lease, make sure you draw those out. Make sure you tell them exactly what those fees are. Don't try to hide anything. Just be very honest with them, and they will thank you for it. Believe me or not, they will thank you. So, what those possible consequences are, and this is where I like to hone in. So, in my lease, I've got a couple scenarios that could happen, and one of which is late fees, talking about lease termination or evictions or judgment. And basically, what I say to them is, listen, if you don't pay rent when it's due, this is what's going to happen. One, you're going to get a one-time late fee, and then for every day thereafter, you're going to get a $20 late fee. Two, I'm going to terminate your lease as soon as I possibly can. Three, I'm going to take you to court and I'm going to get a judgment against you, which I'm going to then use that judgment to garnish your wages if I need to, and garnish your tax refund if I need to. And then further, if that doesn't do anything, I'm going to give the judgment over to a credit bureau or a credit agency, credit collections agency, and then I'm going to tell them, do whatever you can to get money from this person. That's going to ruin your credit. And I don't say it mean, but I just say these are the facts. So you should know what the consequences are, because if you know them, maybe you won't do that. This is a quick little list. I want to show you that this list is what I put in the back of my lease. So I have a little table. It's just a 2-column table, 3-column. I put a little description next to this, but 3-column. And I tell them, these are all of the possible fees. This is a summary of everything that's in this 14-page document. And that way they can look at that last page and they can get a good, 10,000 foot view of what could possibly happen. And so I put this in here. And if you guys are following along and you want to take a picture of this, I don't know if you know how to do that, but there's a screenshot in there. It's Command Shift 4, or there's a screenshot button on Windows. You can take this and then put it in your lease and just make up whatever the actual fees are. So I won't go into detail on all of these, but I think it's important to make sure that you're upfront about what could possibly happen. All right, next, the third bubble, make rent automatic. And this is the third piece to setting yourself up for a system that will actually work for you. Make rent automatic. Make it easy, make it efficient, make it so they don't have to think about it. Because when they have to think about it and do something, human nature will get in the way and they'll mess it up. They're not stupid. It's just the fact that now they have to remember to pay rent, right? So number one, use a tool that has automatic recurring payments. This is key. So I actually put in my lease that they have to pay through Cozy and they have to set up automatic payments. If they don't, then it's a lease violation, and I could theoretically terminate the lease for that. I don't ever want to do that, but that's a lease violation. So there are some states like California, it's not many, but certainly California, where you are allowed to collect rent electronically, but you also have to allow one other method if they want, if they ask for it. So you don't have to do cash, but in this case, in that civil code, it does say you have to select one other method besides electronic transfer or cash. So if they come to you with a check, you wouldn't be able to turn it away. But I do put in my lease that, and I'm not in California, but I do put in my lease that they have to pay through Cozy. If you want the clause that I use, it's in the right-hand side on the handout section, handouts 3 of 5. It says Cozy Clause .docs, DOCX, and you can actually download that and just put that in your lease. I usually put it with the section about how much rent is and when it's due and all that. Feel free to tweak it all you want. All right, so let's move on. And I have a picture of a chicken here. That's odd, but I will get into that. So let's define what rent is, okay? So rent, most people would just say, oh, it's payment, right? Okay, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's payment, but that payment can come in many, many forms. One, it can come in cash. Now, I don't suggest that you ever collect cash. I really don't like it. It bothers me because I don't really want to deal with people who carry around $4,000 in a wad in their pocket. That just screams trouble. So cash is legal tender, but you are allowed to say that you're not going to collect it, right? Now make sure you check your state laws, because that's the catch. But generally speaking, you're allowed to deny cash. And if somebody comes to me with cash, I say, that's great, but please go down to 7-Eleven, go get a cashier's check, and then bring it back to me. And that way we'll have a paper trail of it, and we don't have to worry about it. Cash is prone to theft. I actually made a mistake that I wish I hadn't. I was paying a contractor for a bathroom renovation, and he asked me if I could pay one of the payments in cash because he had a couple other subcontractors to pay. And, I've known him for years, and it didn't ruin our friendship or anything, but he later came back and said, hey, you're short. You didn't pay me everything. I'm like, no, I paid you that cash. Do you remember? He's like, vaguely, how much was that? And he didn't write it down. I took a picture of it, but I can't find the picture, and I couldn't find it in the bank statement. So it was just a mess, and we worked it out, but just, gosh, it was just so bad. Okay, so it's very difficult to prove in court that you actually paid cash. And as I said, it attracts a rough crowd. I don't like to deal with people that carry around thousands of dollars in cash. With that said, let me go back real quick. With that said, I am a Dave Ramsey fan. My wife and I do the cash envelope systems, if anybody knows what that is. So we do carry around cash, but it's clearly labeled in envelopes, and we're certainly not putting a down payment on a rental with cash. So it's a different story. Okay, personal checks. This is probably the most popular way to pay rent still in America. It has been for 50 years. It still is, I would bet. It's losing traction, but it is. The benefits of checks are that they're widely accepted, but they are a hassle to handle. So that's not a benefit, but they are a hassle to handle. And if you have an insufficient funds situation where it bounces, you now have to deal with that. And sometimes you don't even find out for like 10 days, depending on the banks, the specific banks that are working together to do this. You won't even know until it's kind of too late, and then you got to deal with it another way. And checks are often used by scammers. I say this because someone who wants to move in quickly and give you a deposit check right away, they will give you, a check from one account that doesn't have any money in it, and then they'll give you another check from another account that doesn't have any money in it, and then next thing you know, they're in the house. My sister-in-law had this situation happen to her, and she accepted 4 checks from some guy, and all 4 accounts, we later found out, had only about 4 or 5 cents in them. And he was in that house, that condo, for 3 months, and she went to eviction court, and he sent her a text message right before the court date, the time, that said, "I've moved out, you'll never find me." And sure enough, they went over to the house right after the court case, the court date, and he had stuffed a bunch of pillows in the washing machine and overflowed it and damaged a bunch of Brazilian hardwood cherry floors. So this guy was clearly, using checks to skimp on the system. So checks can also tell you a lot about a person. So you can't really figure this out from cash or online rent payments, but if someone hands you this check, right, and the ad that you put up and the ad that they're responding to says, "No pets," what's your first question going to be? Right? Like, "Hey, cute dog, what's your pug's name?" And they're going to say, they're either going to be caught off guard, say, "Oh, his name's Buster." And if that is true, then all of a sudden it's like you realize this is a no pet house, and you've just found out they were going to try to sneak it in. Well, what happens if you get this thing? And for those who can't see it, it says, you say cat lady like it's a bad thing, right? So if it's no pets and all of a sudden she's got this cat lady check, you better believe she's going to have cats in your place. Like, somebody doesn't get a check like this unless they love cats and they have cats. Lastly, there's a picture of a firearm. I've actually never seen this check. This is just something I found on Google, but I want you to know that, whether you're for or against guns, this tells you something about the tenant. And if you live in or if the place is in a multifamily property with a ton of kids, you might want to ask, or I guess it doesn't even have to be kids, it just be anybody. You might want to ask, like, "Hey, how many firearms do you have? And are you storing grenades, live ammunition and other things in my unit, right? Are you storing propane tanks under the sink?" Things like this, because regardless of whether you're for or against guns, if that tenant has guns, I feel like you have a responsibility as a landlord to make sure that they are protecting that and making sure that they are being safe. So if this were to happen to me, I would say, "Hey, listen, just be honest with me. How many can I see your house? Like, can I come over and see how you're storing your guns? Because that's how you're going to store in my house. I don't want a rifle going through drywall and hitting the neighbors." Okay, enough about that. If a guy showed up with a T-shirt that said this, the right to bear arms, I'd probably give him a high five and say, that's hilarious. So good job. Certified checks. Certified checks are uh, an awesome way to collect money, but it still has all the hassles of regular checks, with the exception that it's not going to bounce because you're getting a money order, you're getting a cashier's check from somebody who is going to really come through on it. So that's great, and it's an awesome way to collect a deposit in the beginning if you need something right away, or if they come to you with cash. But it still has problems. You still have to worry about depositing the check, and now you can do it on your phone and all that, which is a little easier. But I just don't like to mess with it. I really don't want to think about rent. I just want it to happen. Next, electronic transfers. This is another way, another form of payment. The thing about electronic transfers is that it really covers a lot of different things. Online rent collection software, your rent payment software like Cozy, that's one way to transfer money through ACH, which is like a bank-to-bank transfer system. That's probably the oldest system in the United States that does this. Then there's internal bank transfers, where if you both have Bank of America accounts, you can both just send each other money really easily because it's all internal. There's wire transfers like Western Union. And then there's e-payment websites like PayPal, which have been around for a long time, but they often say, like, if you go look at the terms and conditions of PayPal, you can't use a personal account to transfer rent because they actually consider rent a business transaction. So if you want to do that, you actually have to pay the 3% or the 2.75 on all of the transactions. And I don't know about you, but if I'm collecting $12,000 in rent every month, I don't want to pay 3%. I'm sorry, PayPal, you can go somewhere else. Then there's apps like Venmo and Square Cash. These are really popular among millennials, but Venmo and Square Cash also have limits. So you typically can't pay a large rent payment with those. So check them out and see if it's working for you. But I really believe that you need a system that not only will help you transfer large amounts of cash like Cozy, but it will also set it up so you can see every transaction. Next, credit cards. Believe it or not, some people pay rent with credit cards. Now, the pros and cons of credit cards are, the con is that you're going to pay a small fee. So either you or the tenant will pay a small fee. Cozy does allow tenants to pay with a credit card or debit card, and if they want to do that, they will have to pay a 2.75% fee. But you would be surprised how many tenants are actually okay with that because they're earning miles or they're earning cash back or whatever, and it's good for them, or it's just convenient. But you could still pay through ACH, through that bank-to-bank transfer through Cozy for free, and that's never going to change. There's chargebacks and disputes that you have to deal with if you're accepting money through credit cards, and then oftentimes you have to have a merchant account. Let me go back here. There we go. Merchant accounts are basically new authorization bank accounts that you have with some sort of a company that processes money. For example, there are companies like Buildium out there, which I was a customer for about 5 years before I switched to Cozy, and they made me sign up with another company, a whole nother processing company, and I had to go through this long 3-month process. It really did take 3 months. I think they've gotten better, but it really did take 3 months, and I had to show 2 years of financials, and I was just a small landlord. LLC, so I'd have a business account. Like, it was 3 months of trauma just to collect rent. Whereas with Cozy, you can get it set up in like 2 minutes. So not worth it. And then if you are collecting cards, like swiping cards, you need a terminal, and those are often expensive to rent. So I just don't deal with terminals. If they want to pay online, they can pay with Cozy and pay with a credit card that way. Next, on-site labor. This is odd, right? Because somebody could pay you rent through labor. This is common. This is actually very, very common in the Midwest, where a landlord or a farmer or somebody would have a field that they need harvesting, and they will hire a bunch of people and say, hey, listen, I want you to come work for me. I want you to harvest the crop, and I want you to stay in my on-site, guest house, and you guys can stay there. I'll give you free rent, and if you do this, and I'll also give you a minimum wage or whatever it is. So usually there's a payment plus rent. But it works out. It's good. It's a really good thing. So if you have that ability and you need some sort of labor done, you can actually say that's how they're going to pay in rent. You could also ask them to fix that shed in the back that you have been delaying. It looks like it's going to collapse. You could get them to just repair the shed or build you a new one. That could be the form of payment. You could have them redo the bathroom that's long needed to be redone. In this case, you can't even cut or close the door. I think I saw a picture of this. Ironically enough, I saw a picture of this after the fact, and the person actually cut a little hole or an indent in the door so that it would shut. Whew, that bathroom really needs to be redone. You could ask them to paint a picture on your wall. Hey, they could paint a mural, or heck, they could paint a room. Like maybe you need to paint the entire interior or exterior of your house. You could have your tenants do that if they're willing to make that their rent payment. There's nothing wrong with that. Um, I want to talk about offsite goods and services now. So I have a picture of a Saab 9.5 because I have a friend who did some technical spreadsheet work for somebody years ago, and it was about $7,000 worth of work. That was his bill. And the guy said, the customer was like, I'm sorry, I don't have the money. I'm being exported, actually. Um, that's not the right word, is it? Anyway, I'm leaving the country, and I can't take some of my stuff with me, so how about I pay you with a car? And he said, great. So he actually got a Saab 9.5. It was maybe about 7 years old, but he got a new car for him. And that was a form of offsite goods and services. I mean, it wasn't rent, but it was fine. It worked for them. So next, you can do any sort of trades and service. As I said, you could do cars. You could do valuable jewelry or art. So if you have something of value, you could trade that. You could give livestock, and that gets back to the chicken. You could get paid in cattle or chickens or whatever, as long as it's okay with you. Just don't do anything illegal. Okay. Uh, I'm just going to stop there and not expand on that. But back to number one, the tradesman's service. I had a friend who liked to flip houses, and he had a master electrician living in one of his houses. And he said, hey, listen, you're 2 months behind on rent. I have this other house that I need to redo the entire electrical system in the house. Will you do that for me? And then I'll forgive your debt. And the guy said, absolutely, because it was labor. It was easy. He could do it in a couple days, and it would wipe the slate clean. Well, he ended up doing about $5,000 worth of work for like $2,000 worth of forgiving rent. So it was a win-win on both sides. Next, I want to talk about how rent is paid. We just talked about the different types of rent, the different forms of rent, and the forms of currency that you can use. Now let's talk about how to actually get it from the tenant to the landlord or property manager. First and foremost, online rent payments. So we briefly touched on this, but you can set up Cozy to have all of your tenants pay a specific amount, and they have control over this too. And they can say, I'm going to pay $868, and then Sarah's going to pay $950, and Mark's going to pay $850, and then all that money just goes straight to you. But they're only paying their portion. It's awesome. And if you have joint and several liability in your lease, you can still hold Sarah responsible for Jordan and Jordan responsible for Mark. It doesn't change that. But online rent payments are awesome. Ever since I switched, I'll tell you this. As I said, I used Buildium for 5 years, and it's a great system. But I did have issues with late payments. But when I switched to Cozy 3 years ago, in the last 2 years, I have not had a single late payment, and I have 17 tenants. So each one is making their own payment. So it just works. It's just they get rid of a lot of the issues. So let's talk about it. No more checks. You don't have to deal with paper cuts. You don't have to deal with depositing anything or tracking anything separately. It's all already documented in your lease ledger. So it automatically posts there, so you don't have to actually write anything down. It can and should be automatic. You get paid faster. So a check will take a few days to clear if you have a different bank, anywhere from 4 to 10 days if it bounces. With online rent payments, you can get it in 3 to 5 business days. And then actually Cozy's doing something pretty cool where they're actually going to speed it up soon, where you can get it in like 2 days, which is great. And then it's super easy. Like really, like you heard my tenant, here's the story of my tenant earlier. He said, I don't want to stop using Cozy, so I need to find a landlord that uses Cozy when I leave. That says a lot. And then, as I said, I haven't had a late payment in 2 years, and it's been fantastic. Bank transfers, this is at the core of what Cozy does. There's an ACH transfer that happens, but you don't need to use software for that because each bank will actually or can communicate with each other. But it requires you to give the tenant your account number. So, if you give the tenant your bank account number and then you say, go deposit money into my account, um, they'll go to their bank, they'll say, I want to transfer this money, and they'll pay a small fee. And then the killer here is that it leaves you prone to unauthorized payments. So I've actually heard this a lot from people at trade shows, and they say, I have tenants who I'm trying to evict, but then they deposit $1 into my account because I gave them my account number. They will do that, and then they will say, you can't evict me because you accepted a payment for me. And sure enough, they are right. So you can't stop it. The only way to stop it is to get your bank to halt all transactions, right? Which is not feasible. And then or switching account numbers, which that's crazy. They will thwart evictions, and sometimes there's transfer limits. So it really just depends. I don't like giving the tenant my bank account information. So the next one is online bill pay. This is different from online rent payments and bank transfers, but every bank out there has online bill pay. I'm sure most of us use it to pay water bills, electric bills, or whatever, and it integrates with those companies typically. But you can send a check really to anybody. So a lot of times tenants will say, hey, listen, I set up my online bill pay to just send you a rent check every month on the 1st. And that's great. And it will show up on the 1st, just like they said. However, you still have to do with checks. You still have to deal with it and still have to work with checks. It's not efficient. If you're traveling and you've got mail sitting in your mailbox, you're not going to get paid for a while. So it just isn't going to work. So online bill pay. The benefits are really for the tenant only. They're online, but you're not. And then with online bill pay and just mailing checks or payments, you have to deal with the Postal Service. I love the Postal Service, but it's a dying breed. You will have unforeseen delays. And then no matter how many times you tell your tenants, you will have false assumptions about when it's actually due. Yes, they will say, hey, listen, the post office was closed on Sunday and that was the 1st, so it's actually due on Monday, right? And you're like, no, you just need to be smarter and send your payment in sooner. So they will think that, and then they will say, hey, it's not late because it was post dated, right? Or it was not post dated, it was stamped by the post office. And when I gave it to the post office, they think that is how it works. And for those of you who just did your own taxes and you're waiting on your refund, or you had to write a huge check, the IRS will take something that's postmarked by the deadline. Well, that's because the Postal Service is part of the government and the IRS is part of the government. So it's the same entity. The Postal Service is not your second hand. They are not your business partner. So they gave it to some other person. They gave it to the Postal Service, not to you. And that's why it's not postmarked. It doesn't work. There's unnecessary risk. I think it was 2 or 3% of all mail. I haven't looked at the stat recently, but 2 to 3% of all mail is delayed or lost. And it's been that way since the 60s. So not worth it. Totally not worth it. And then if you do end up having them mail you checks or mailing you payment, the only thing I can say is that go get 12 envelopes, postmark them, or put your address on them with a stamp so that they know where to mail it. And literally all they have to do is drop a check in there and then put it in the mail. So they don't even have to worry about writing out your address or even paying for postage. Do that so they have no excuse. This is not the Red Door Spa. This is just in-person rent checks. I wish I was at a spa. I'm sure that would make me feel a little bit better about, you missed it earlier. I've got a little fever. But anyway, I'm excited to be here, and let me just get into this. So a lot of people still collect rent in person. I don't like this for 1,000 reasons. One, it sets the wrong precedents. You are walking to their property and saying, I'm here to collect rent, and it sets the precedence that if you don't show up, then they don't have to pay rent. That's wrong. The contract says they have to pay rent regardless. But if you say, I'm going to show up, and you don't, for whatever reason, then is it late? Well, maybe, but not really. It's awkward. So it's a hassle for your tenants. They have to be present, or they have to leave it out of the mailbox or something. They have to do something to make sure that it's there when you show up, and they will avoid you. if you've ever done this, you know that you park your car on the street, you start walking down the sidewalk up to their front door, and then all of a sudden you see the lights go out, and you hear the deadbolt go click, and then you knock on the door and no one's home, and you're like, I just saw the lights get turned off. So they will avoid you, and now because they're not answering and you didn't give proper notice really to enter, you have to come back the next day. So it's a hassle. Don't do it. Just don't do it. I actually met someone at a conference once who said that she's starting to get her properties on online rent collection, but she deals with a lot of non-citizens who don't have bank accounts, don't have social security numbers, don't have any form of um, financial accounting, and they love to pay with cash all the time. So she had a bunch of houses all in a row down this one street. And she said, I like to do, well, she goes, I know it's not a good idea, but I still do the ice cream truck method. And I looked at her, I said, well, what do you mean? You give them ice cream? And they said, no, 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 no. We drive down the street on the first, and everyone on the house or on the block knows this. We drive down the street, we roll our windows down, and we blare our music. And when they hear that, they know to come out and pay us. That's how we collect rent. And she's like, it's great because we get, 7 or 8 houses all done at the same time. But again, it's hilarious. And she realizes it's flawed, but again, it sets the wrong precedence. What if your car breaks down? What if you can't get over there? And now it's your fault that rent is late. Drop boxes, they can work. I don't like them though. So let's talk about that. So a lot of times, if you're a large property manager, you have a drop box kind of built into the glass wall or built like at the front door or something where, it's locked and they can drop off their rent. Well, that works if you have a staff that can check it every day during that grace period, and actually every day of the month is what you need to check it as. So not only does it eat up a ton of your time, but it adds delay because if somebody drops it off and then your staff doesn't check it for the third, how do you know who paid on time and who paid on the second? You don't know. And believe it or not, no matter how good your lockbox is, it's prone to theft. This is an example of a little one. Someone with a crowbar could get into this. So unless you're willing to invest in a security system too, to monitor that all the time, then I just see it as a huge risk. There's no proof of delivery, so they have no way to tell you or say that they actually paid rent if you lose it. This happened all the time at the 300 unit complex that I worked at, or that I rented at. People would say, I put in my rent, and I believe them. And then, it was stuck at the bottom of the box, or somebody just dropped it as they were carrying it to their desk. Like, it just, all kinds of bad stuff can happen. We actually had one situation. This was hilarious to me, but not so funny to everyone else. Someone who was being evicted on his way out late at night lit a whole matchbook, and dropped it in the Dropbox. And it was right around the end of the month. So, 300 units potentially with checks in there, and now it's going up in smoke. Well, it didn't burn the building down, but now that person lost all of that rent. So what do you do with that? You go back to the tenants and say, I'm sorry, I don't know if you actually paid or not, but you still need to do it again. Anyway, it's a hassle. So bank or ATM deposits, this is another method. And if you don't know about this, this is a neat one, I think. It does take a little bit of work, but what you can actually do is call your bank and say, hey, listen, I've got tenants. I want them to pay at an ATM because there's one, my bank has an ATM near their house or whatever. Can you give me a deposit-only check card? And they will say, absolutely. And it will be in your tenant's name. And then that tenant can go up to the ATM, type in a PIN number, their PIN number, and it's only for that tenant. And then they can deposit checks or money into that ATM, and it will go into your account. The beauty is that they don't have any withdrawal privileges. However, it still requires the tenant to go to the bank. They get an immediate receipt, but they might still get your account number. And also you can't necessarily cut down on unauthorized payments. So they could theoretically stop an eviction by doing that. Now, if you get smart and you want to evict somebody, the first thing you do is call the bank and say, cancel that card. But, what happens if they win the case and now you got to get a new card? I don't like it because it often takes sometimes 5 to 10 days for the bank to issue a card and then for the tenant to get set up and all that. why spend 5 or 10 days getting that set up when I could do it in Cozy in one day? So worth looking at if you don't have any other options, or you have tenants who want to pay in cash, like maybe and you want to let them, maybe do that. So talk to your bank about a deposit only card. Lump sum payments. This is an interesting but not so transparent way of doing it. This is something that I've seen landlords do, and I've done it before too in some situations. It's where basically someone doesn't qualify, or someone you're not sure if they're going to pay rent, and you say, hey, listen, if you just write me the whole rent amount. I had somebody who was only going to live there for 4 months, and he didn't have any income at all. Well, I take that back. His income was less than $1,000, and he was trying to rent a $1,600 place. And I just said, hey, listen, you sound great, but you're not going to qualify. And he said, oh, no, I've got a trust fund, and I can take money out of that all whenever I want. And I said, well, that's cool. So, you don't have the income to qualify, but if you write me a check for 4 months worth of rent and the deposit, then we don't have an issue. And sure enough, I got a check for $8,000 or about that. So it can work. Just check with your state laws, and you can check that on Landlordology. You can check to see if your state allows prepaid rent payments. And sometimes states only allow maybe 2 months or 1 month of prepaid rent, like first month's rent. So it's worth looking into, but if there's no limit, then that's an option too. I think I explained this already. In California, and I just mentioned that because I know I have a lot of people from California on the webinar tonight, but you can collect 1 month prepaid rent if you have a lease that's less than 6 months. But if the lease is more than 6 months, then you can collect unlimited prepaid rent. So the civil code there is 1950.5C. So check it out. Hope that helps. Every state has similar laws, but maybe different stats, but they have something about it. Post-dated checks. This is this is an interesting one. Not a fan, but what it is basically when you tell a tenant, I should say it's like the old school way of doing online rent payments, automatic payments. You say, hey, listen, when you move in, you have to give me 12 checks dated for each of the months, and you say, give April 1st, May 1st, June 1st, and then I'll hold on to them, and then I will deposit them on the first of the month. And I think that this works, and 20 years ago was the best way to ensure that you had automatic recurring payments, except for the fact that you had to deposit it. But the problem is that it instills distrust among you and the tenant. Like, imagine if you met this person, you screen them, you only know them for like a week, and you're talking money, and you say, now give me like $40,000 or $20,000, whatever it is, in post-dated checks. And they're going to look at you like you're crazy, especially nowadays when you can do everything else online. So I think it's a method. I don't recommend it for 1,000 reasons, but it happens out there. All right, so that's our 3-step approach. So step 1, select quality tenants. Step 2, set your clear expectations and consequences. Don't forget the consequences. And that's just where I walk them through the lease and say, this is what's going to happen if you don't pay rent. And then get them set up with automatic rent payments. It's as simple as that. I think if you do these 3 things, you're going to set yourself up and be better than 99.9% of property managers out there who don't have their act together. This alone, doing these 3 pillars, will help you develop a steady cash flow, hands down. So I don't ever like to end a webinar without talking about some additional resources that you guys can go to and learn from. Again, this webinar is free and was free, and we're recording it, but you can also check out Landlordology. We have a ton of information there, a ton of great stuff. Here's a picture of it again. And you can see right here, there's the state laws on the left-hand side. I don't know if you can see my mouse moving, but then there's the resources directory, which is not any sort of affiliate marketing or anything. It's really just my list of tools that I think are quality. We don't get any money for them. We don't get paid, nothing. It's just they've earned it, right? They've earned to be on that list. So check it out. Then there's landlord guides, which are these things. You can download those. And then the landlord lifecycle, which if you're getting started, that's a great place to kind of learn the whole process. Check it out at landlordology.com. The state laws that we have there, I think we actually have a few more that we've done since this picture was taken, but you can click on anything that's green and learn about the state laws in that state. And what the landlord-tenant laws say in a nice, beautiful summary. So they actually have links to the actual statutes, so you don't have to assume that we're making it up. You can click on the statute and read the actual code yourself, and it's our way to say thank you. We're doing this and trying to make the world a better place, and we're not making up these state laws. That here are the statutes. This is an example of the California rental laws page. As you can see, there's like 1,400 comments. I think it's up to 1,700 now. But it was published back in 2013, and we keep it up as things change. But it's awesome. I mean, it really is just a great summary. These are the guides I mentioned earlier. That's landlordology.com/guides. And then Cozy, again, is free property management software. So I want to show you that real quick. Let me show you that. Let me show you what that looks like. So here's Cozy's website. It's cozy.co. And let's see what I can do here about, yeah. Okay, great. I think you should be able to see the web browser. If I go to this is actually one of my real leases. And this is my account, even though it says Willie Lang. I'll let you know that we have anonymized all the personally identifying information. So Willie Lang is actually Lucas Hall. But I wanted to show you what it really looks like. Like, I don't have a tenant named Beulah. I have a tenant named Beth. And so anyway, the names and the anything personable is been changed. But you can learn and see exactly how a lease might work. And so all of my tenants here at this property at 1524 Ezekiel Corner they're paying rent online. And so Nicole pays $978 and Beulah pays $1,167, and they've got it set up to pay automatically. So these are all the completed transactions, and these are all the upcoming ones. I can click on any of them and see a little bit more about it. If I go down here, I can even see, here it'll show up in my bank statement as Beulah Roberts, which is awesome if I have to reconcile the bank account. But it tells me where it's going, how it's being processed, and any other information. But it keeps a record. So not only can I just track the rent and the charges and the payments they make, but I can also add other things. Like if they paint and I want to give them a $300 credit, I can do that. I can just say, this is for painting. And this is $300. And I want to apply it. I want to apply it to tomorrow and add a credit. And so then the balance on their lease actually goes down by $300. And so next month, if they want to, they don't have to pay me $300 of the total rent. It's right there. So it's a credit. I could also do the same thing with charges. So if they come to you and they say, hey, listen, 3 out of 4 of the tenants want to pay online, that's great. You can set them all up. But one person wants to pay with the check, and you're okay with that. Let's just say you're okay with that. You can collect that check from that tenant and then add a charge. I'm sorry, not add a charge. You can add you can add an offline payment. So anything that's not done online, you can just say, I'm going to record this payment, whether it's cash, check, whatever, and then it will go into the balance. And so you'll be able to tell who paid what, how much they owe, and then how they're paying. So you can add a charge here. So if they have parking charges or storage fees or utility fees, you can just go in and add a charge and say, this month's utility fee is $140. Put it in there, and then they can pay you. They can pay you with a credit card. They can pay you with a bank statement or a bank transfer, whatever. But you can look up more about the tenants. You can look up all the information about the leases, so you can extend the lease if they renew. And what I like to point out here is that you can actually do something here where you can end this lease. This is so critical if you were trying to evict somebody. You can say, shut this off. So you won't lose the history, but you will end the lease, which is critical because you want to end the lease before you go to eviction. And that will stop them from paying you anymore. So they can't thwart the eviction by trying to transfer you money. You can actually prevent that, which is something that you can't do very easily with bank transfers or other things through your bank. There's more here, but we're talking about rent payment, so I wanted to just tell you what was going on. And if you like, just create a free Cozy account. It's cozy.co, and then you can dive in and try it. It's truly, truly, truly free. So let's go back to the presentation here. All right, perfect. Okay, let's do main screen. Make it big. Perfect. Okay. So check it out, cozy.co. And if you do sign up, again, it's free. So if you do sign up, let me know. Like, shoot me an email. My email is lucas@cozy.co or lucas@landlordology.com. I would love to celebrate with you and just be excited and congratulate you on taking this step, a good step in the right direction towards automated online rent payments, because it will change your life. I mean, like I said, I haven't had a late rent payment in 2 years. I don't know any other landlords that can say that. So without further ado, let's go ahead and do question and answer. So, okay, I've got a couple questions in here. Let me do this. I will answer them in the order they were received. If you have questions now, go ahead and type them into that box and I will get to them. So, Deborah is asking, would you rent to prospective applicants that you've never met in person? And the answer is yes. So the data that I gather through the application and the credit report and the background check is really enough that enough for me to make a financial decision. But I do always talk to them on the phone. Sometimes if they're from out of state, which happens, they're moving and they can't visit the property beforehand. I do a Skype session with them or FaceTime, and I just see them. So that will help me put a face to them, and then as part of the process, I will always ask for a government-issued photo ID, so their driver's license or passport. And that's critical because now you've seen this person on FaceTime and you're getting their passport, and you want to make sure that those two faces match. So I don't care if I've never met them in person. And again, that actually just helps me because it eliminates most forms of discrimination. But no, I don't need to, but I do get the other stuff. And that's a different question really about tenant screening. Okay, so Lori is asking, can you put the fees up again? Yes, I sure can. Lori, I hope you're still with us here. Let me do this. Oops, that's big. Okay. Fees. For sure. Thanks for asking, because it's usually other people too that want it. So this is my summary of fees. So all of these fees are in my lease somehow, and I just basically pull them out of the legalese text and put them in a nice, easy to understand chart at the end of the lease, like right at the last page, right above their signatures. So if they needed to research their subletting fee because they weren't paying attention when they signed it, but now they want to sublet, they can just go to that last page and really learn. So that's my summary of fees. I also want to show you something else that I have. If you can see this. This is a Word doc that I have for you. It's in the documents section, the handouts 3 of 5, and you can download it. But this is a welcome letter that I give all of my tenants, and I do that to help them get set up with Cozy. So right when they sign the lease, I give them this thing. I say, okay, well, now let's go ahead and set up your rent payments. Let's go ahead and get started. And you can schedule it for when the lease starts, and it's real easy. And you can even collect a deposit that way if you want to. And so I walk them through this, and I just say, here's what to do, and here's the reasons why you would want to pay rent online and set up recurring payments, and here's what you need to do for utilities. Here's how you set up. Here's all the phone numbers, and then I give them some warm fuzzies, and I say, here are some other things that might help you with your move. So here's how you can contact me and my emergency contact, and here's a summary of the rent and late fees, and here's where the smoke detectors are. Here's the local website or local newspaper, and I just try to encourage them to get to know the neighborhood. So this is a great way to do it, and oftentimes they really enjoy this because it gives them a place to start. So you can download that right there in the handout section. It's called welcomeletter.docs. Okay. I'll put that back up while we're talking. If you need to see that summary of list, it should be there now. Okay. Deborah, you're asking something about would you rent to a tenant with a permit? I'm not sure what you're asking, but yes, if your city requires you to have a permit to rent out a unit, then you absolutely should do that. You don't want to try to, get around the government rules or anything, because it'll just haunt you in the end. I mean, all you have to do is piss off one tenant and they will report you, and now you've got fines to pay. So yeah, make sure you get the permits and do whatever you need to do to get certified. It's not common. It's more common in cities. I've never seen state laws that require it, but certainly in cities. Okay, Maggie. By the way, I was just kidding about your hair. Thanks. It's okay. It's a little long. I need to give it a cut. Okay, what about Deborah's asking, what about getting collecting rent in a box in the lobby? So I think you probably asked us before we got to that. So the Dropbox idea, it's done a lot, and it only really works if you have a large staff who can collect it or check it every single day, and then they're adamant about recording what's in there every single day. If you are lax about that, then it's just going to hurt you in the long run. It's going to be more of a hassle, and it's going to take up your time. I personally just don't deal with it. Um, a lot of property managers have actually stopped doing uh, on-site rent drop-offs. So whether it's dropping off rent at the leasing office or Dropbox or whatever, they will actually say, if you give us a check and you give it to us in person, there's going to be a $20 service charge. But if you pay online, then it's zero. So that way they're not excluding. They're not saying like you can't pay, like in California, you have to allow some other method. You can't pay, and they're not doing that, but they're just saying there's an extra fee because it costs us time and money to do it. I think it's genius. And the property managers I know, the large ones who have implemented that, saw that almost all of their tenants have moved to online rent payments, and now they're saving time and money. So give it a shot. Another question is, you need a letter of authorization from a tenant allowing you to keep post-dated checks on account. That may be true. Yeah, in some states, every state has a different law about checks and finances. Uh, you would simply just put that in the lease. And so if that's your method where you're collecting post-dated checks, you would just put that authorization in the lease and they would sign it. So that's where you would get that authorization. You can't just not put it in the lease and then expect them to do it. Okay, Joanne is asking, what happens on Cozy if the tenant is set up on the system, but they have no money in their account when the time for the rent payment is due to come out? That's a great question. That actually happened to me was it last month? I think it was last month. One of my tenants, he didn't have any money in his checking account. I think just his paycheck hadn't come through yet. And by 9 o'clock that morning, I had an email from Cozy. It was an automated email, and it just said, "Hey, listen, your tenant, his transfer failed." So my tenant also got that email, and then by the time I got around to contacting him and saying, like, "Listen, buddy, your thing failed," he had already logged in and updated the payment method and transferred money to his account, and then Cozy just immediately tried again, and it worked. It was fine. So we got notice at 9 o'clock, and by 9:40, he had already paid rent. So it was not late because it happened all on the same day. There were no insufficient fund fees by either bank, because when it fails, it just fails. That's the difference with checks and online rent payments. If it can't happen, it just doesn't happen at all. And there's no fees because there was no time or energy spent to try to process it. So with checks, you're going to get like a $50 check fee from your bank, which is ridiculous. But yeah, anyway, so that's one method. So that worked really well in this situation, and he was happy because now he doesn't have a late fee, and I was happy because there was no real problem. Okay, so the next question from Deborah is, why would you decrease rent owed for payment or reimbursement for a repair? Why would you decrease rent owed? So why would you give a credit? I think that's what you're asking. On a lease, why would you give a credit? And that's simply because they want to pay you some other way. So you can credit them that payment. So if they're paying with chickens, or they're paying by rerunning your electrical, or they're putting a new roof on your house, and their time and their labor is worth money, you can give them a credit for it. So there's nothing to say that you can't say, I will take $1,000 off your rent if you paint the living room. And what you would do is, when they finish painting the living room, log into Cozy and just say, here's $1,000 credit. So now they owe $1,000 less. Does that make sense? Cool. Okay, Deborah, Cozy is free now, but what about in the future? I will promise you, okay, I'm looking at you in the eye, that the core features will always be free. So you will always be able to screen tenants with credit reports and background checks. You'll be able to list your properties and collect online applications and collect rent payments through ACH, which can be slow. It's like 3 to 5 days, business days, but that is free. Now, there's other parts of Cozy that cost. So if a tenant is filling out an application and you're requiring a credit report or a background check, the tenant pays for those things. So we do make money, and we do charge for things. And so that income, that revenue, is what allows us to give away the other things to landlords and property managers for free. So Cozy is completely free. If you want the extra features, you're more of a professional and you really want quicker payments, or you want, we're going to do some other things like renter's insurance. If you want that kind of stuff, you can pay for it. That's an option, but you can certainly use Cozy and run your business for free. When I was using Buildium, I was being charged like $64 or something every month. And Appfolio is like $250. So, we don't have all the bells and whistles, but we certainly have enough to help you run your property management business. And it doesn't feel like you're killing a fly with a cannon. Okay. Aaron is asking, when you email the webinar afterwards, will the handouts be included? You know what? I will put the handouts up. So right now we have a webpage called landlordology.com/replay. It's /replay, and that's got the last month's webinar on it. But eventually, tomorrow, the next day, we will post this one and the post and the documents too up there, assuming that the recording was successful. Okay, so last question from Deborah: how secure is Cozy, and are there any issues with fraud or malware? We actually have a very large fraud department to make sure that doesn't happen. Cozy was founded by somebody who used to help Citibank find the bad guys and make sure that kind of stuff doesn't happen. So we have bank level security and encryption. It's super safe. It's much safer than checks, much safer than debit cards, at an ATM, much safer than cash. And it just worked. So if you want to check out the security details, there's a page on Cozy about that. It's down at the bottom of the footer. All right, great. I think that's all the questions. And if you have one more, throw it in there, but that's it. And I am just super pleased to be with you tonight. So thanks again for everybody helping out. And that is the conclusion of the presentation. Again, you'll get an email tomorrow with more information on if you need to watch the replay. But thanks again for joining, and cheers.